Okay, we're recording.
Okay, so we are calling back to order the open session of the executive committee at 10:39 on Wednesday, May 12th. I don't think I need to read the statute again. We just need to go to our motions for the action as a result of executive
Any
session.
roll call first, though?
Yes, we do, please.
Sorry. Thank you. Austin,
Here.
Paul,
Present.
Jacobson,
Here.
Leffler,
Here.
McNulty,
Here.
Murray,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
and for CCS, we have Malinowski, Wishmeyer, and Stone.
All right, we have two motions to make coming out of executive session as a result of our discussions. Who would like to make the first one?
I'll make the first one to approve and release the minutes of the November 11, 2020 and keep closed the minutes of October 18, 2017 and November 8, 2017.
And I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
We'll start with Leffler,
Yes.
McNulty,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Austin,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes,
Thank you.
forgot the
Got to be
alphabet.
careful, Anthony. Mick is trying to be you.
I don't have nearly as good hair.
All right, that motion passes. We have a second motion. Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to destroy the verbatim recordings of closed session meeting from November 13th, 2019, effective tomorrow, May 13th, 2021.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay,
Good.
Kate had the motion, Diane second. And if we can get a roll call vote for that too, please.
We'll start with McNulty,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes. Yes.
Austin,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes,
Leffler.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for making quick work of that. Next, we have reports. I think my paper cut something off. So next up, I have reports, president report. I don't have anything. Secretary.
No report.
Treasurer.
I don't think so. Beth, do I have a report? No, good.
I don't think so.
Committees and groups. So Kate, you wanted to add something here.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something with database management because I feel like it's going to come up again. So one of the items on our agenda, was it only last week? It's time just flies. Was adding an additional field to the patron record so that Evanston can capture some demographic information. And so Alex chairs the committee, and I have a staff member on the committee with me as well, and I'm also on the committee. Alex had to jump off early. He felt very strongly that we should only collect the minimal amount of information necessary for patron to be able to issue a library card. Karen Danzig Lyons came and spoke about why they wanted the information. I had originally been like, well, like we want to collect the data in a way that will actually be useful. And I felt like they were going to smush up a couple of categories. And so I wasn't like super excited about that because I didn't know whether the data then, the way it was being gathered, was going to be useful for the purposes Karen was intending it. So the intent behind it is to be able to gather demographic, race, ethnicity, and country of origin information from patrons so that Evanston wants to be able to see if their EDI efforts are actually having a positive impact on the communities that they are trying to serve, right? That they think that they are underserving currently, but they don't know because they don't have any of the data. Rebecca gave a fabulous talk about the importance of desegregation of data. There was some discussion. There were some people that obviously were uncomfortable with it, but voted yes. Other people that did vote no. And I, after that meeting, heard from a few staff that heard from like some BIPOC groups in Illinois that like this was a thing that was kind of traveling the rounds. And so I had asked Rebecca if we could do some training to help people understand, because I think in general, our data literacy skills as librarians gathering and understanding data are lower than they should be. I'm going to just try to be diplomatic about that. And so I wanted to just bring it up here because I think it's important for executive committee to be aware. And I wanted Rebecca to be aware that I had fielded some questions, and I probably should have asked, like Rebecca gave a really great summary to Alex because he had to leave early, and the vote didn't go, I think, as he would have wanted it to. It didn't go as he would have wanted it to explain kind of the importance of this, and that there's a real educational opportunity here to help people understand the importance of gathering this data, and that we need to use it in a responsible way, as we do with any patron data. But I guess I just wanted to, like, it feels like that might become a thing, and I think it's important for executive committee to be aware. And I think Rebecca and her team has a really good plan in place for helping people understand, but it was more just kind of like shining a light that this might be something that we hear more about.
So how did
Yeah.
the vote go? Because I haven't talked to my person.
We voted in favor. And we did two votes, one in favor of adding it, but then we instructed Rebecca to work with Evanston and an EDI consultant to actually construct which terms should be used in a drop-down menu so that we're gathering data in a way that would actually be helpful.
And so this is something that everyone could use, not
Correct.
just Evanston. Okay,
But they don't have to.
right.
Yeah, so just some additional context. First, I should have put this in the packet and I just didn't think of it because it's part of like the May meetings, which go in the June packet. So thank you for bringing it up, Kate. Yes, so as follow-up to that meeting, I have reached out to Biz Lindsay Ryans, who's working with Rails, because I feel like this is going to come up at other Rails libraries as well, and potentially could be relevant to her work with their DEI committee or EDI committee. So I did reach out to her, and she asked if she can talk to someone at Evanston before moving forward. So she has Karen and Tim Longo's information. And so as of right now, I'm waiting to hear back from her/them on how that conversation went. I shared with her some of the concerns that were in the meeting, and I'm just trying to pull up some of this stuff. Excuse me. Biz Lindsay. Oh, okay. So the concerns from the meeting, some were pretty specific. One, so we pulled the race and ethnicity options from federal standards, and that those federal standards include the term American Indian, which
I
Kate was
brought
like,
this up.
that's kind of weird, which I agree with.
Especially after we just voted to get rid of illegal alien.
Right. So American Indian, and then the pairing of Black or African American, Kate had some concerns about as well. And then there was a question in general about including race and ethnicity in the same question, because in the census, Hispanic or Latino is covered in ethnicity, not in race. But Deborah shared with us some research that actually the government did that found it's more effective to ask it in one question than in two, because then there is no like race for Hispanic or Latino, and they're like, but I'm not white. Like they'll put other, and so anyway. So those were some specific issues, and then some more general issues. Is collecting demographic data a privacy risk? It's not personally identifiable. I personally don't think it's a privacy risk, but I posed the question to the consultant. there's a trust issue that this was, I think, Alex's big concern. Should the government be collecting this data? Will patrons feel comfortable sharing the data, or will they feel obligated to provide it because the government is asking? Will it deter undocumented residents from getting library cards or accessing data? There was a concern from a staff member about, will bad actors within a library access the data maliciously? Which
And I
feel
think
like
that with some new trustees coming on board at some of the libraries that are very anti people of other races and cultures, that was one of the concerns. I'm trying to be very vague because we're being recorded.
I would say that a board member should never have access to the library database. And if that's happening at any libraries, please let me know. Thank you. And then there was also a question about legality, like, would a library be, and this was more about like Evanston's practices, would Evanston be offering services to people based on their race or nationality and like not to others? And this library, staff member from this library, they participate in a free and reduced lunch distribution. And so all of their like signage and everything has big legal disclaimers about like why it's available to some people but not others based on, you know, the free and reduced lunch standards. So I forwarded all of those questions to the consultant and asked if she'd be interested in, one, helping us make sure that we're providing the data options in the drop-down menu that would be most appropriate to be collecting from staff, from patrons, and also most helpful to library staff, most effective. And then would she also be interested, my preference would be that she would provide a training actually at governing board at an existing meeting that we would record separate from the governing board meeting and then separately make available to library staff. Because I want to make sure library admin are getting the training or the I don't know the training, but the information. And I don't think that would happen as robustly if it did not happen within a governing board meeting setting. So that is where we're at on that. Are there questions or concerns from this committee or other steps you'd want to take before we hear back from the consultant? I also have she has not said anything about, I said like, we'll talk compensation, and she has mentioned nothing about a contractor compensation. So I think she's waiting to talk to Evanston first and then.
To see how much work it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure, so.
And this is something that will be on an application form, or who's going to be determining what the answer is?
So it would be, there would be a field that appears in LEAP for staff to fill out. So as far as how Evanston collects the data, my understanding is that it would be on their library card application as an optional form, and the patron would just tick the box. Karen was very clear that no staff member would be making an assumption based on someone's appearance, what box should be ticked. And there would be prefer not to say as an option as well. And then for libraries that don't want to collect the data, as Kate said, it would not be a required field in the patron record, so you could save a record without it. Deborah has confirmed that we can even just like hide all the values except for like NA, this like don't use this field or something like that. So if it's a problem for libraries to even see the field, we can't take it away entirely, but we can take out the options so no staff members are like, oh, I should just be filling this out for patrons as they come up willy-nilly, to avoid that training issue.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just seeing that Evanston's a totally different bird than we are, because I'm pretty sure that everybody would not want to put that information in. We'd have a lot of NAs, not applicable.
Yeah, and so this is definitely an area where I think, you know, the differences between our libraries becomes more clear, that for some of our members, this might be really helpful data. I think for Evanston in particular, I 100% understand why they want it, given, you know, recent history, their current strategic plan, and everything that's going on. And so I do not want CCS to stand in the way of them collecting this data. and options for them to collect it outside of the ILS are like really subpar. They're just not great. So it becomes sort of what CCS's responsibility to the rest of our members in like using a field up for Evanston, because to have a non-free text field, like we're limited in how many of those we can have. But the committee did determine like this seems valuable enough to Evanston to let them have that non-free text field. But then because we only get one shot at it, we want to make sure that if other libraries do want to use it, it's not specific to Evanston's needs and would serve a general wider population as well, different population.
Like I could see us using it. We're hiring an EDI consultant and we'll be doing, you know, an assessment. We don't have good data now, and I anticipate that's one of the things they're going to want us to start collecting, but we're not at a place right now where we would want to start that until we do more training with staff and understanding things. And I had actually emailed Biz when I got the packet. I read through it and I'm like, ooh, like there was something about it that like just struck a chord, like, this is weird. And so I'm like, I'm not an expert, I'll contact an expert. And she's like, oh no, it's good to collect this data. And I was like, oh, well, that's a different way of looking at it. I hadn't, you know, like, I think we look at it through very narrow lenses, but we often as libraries make the assumption that we are serving people because we're libraries and we do good in the world, but we actually don't have any data to support that we're bias-free institutions. You could also argue like the opposite, that we have data showing that we do actually have a lot of bias. And so I'm like cautious. I think that there's training needed and we need to get people on board, but I think that this is a trend that we will be seeing more of us take on in the coming years.
This is interesting. As Kate knows and everybody else knows, data is fascinating to me. And I don't know that we will be using this. I guess my question, like, I don't really know the ILS very well. I was on the database committee for a long time and we didn't talk about things like this. I honestly don't remember what we talked about. Diane and I ran a tight ship and kept things going.
Yeah.
But
No new rules.
yeah.
That was what you guys talked about and you did a great job and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, but I guess one of my questions is like, I could see in X amount of years, us wanting to say, okay, what about people who are on the spectrum? Or what about people who have other disabilities? And like, and where does it end? And like, my library is really interested in seniors. And I know we can get age group, but seniors who are experiencing dementia. Can I use the ILS for that? Or is that appropriate for the ILS to be doing or not? And then why is mine not appropriate, but Evanston's is? And that's just a question I have. And like, I'm not planning on doing dementia, but like, that's something we're thinking about. We've got a lot of people who are have experienced childhood trauma who have homes around the library and they come in. That's interesting. You know, like I don't want to, but like, I'm just saying there's other subgroups that we might want to be targeting. I get what Evanston's doing. I support it. But like, if we only have one shot at this, it makes me a little nervous is all.
We only have one shot at a drop-down menu that is the UDF. We have other options for free text fields that we could add. And I would add for the dementia piece and some of the other things is when it becomes medical information, that to me is when it crosses a line.
Yes. So yeah, just to confirm what Kate's saying, like I said, we have one shot and I mean, we're not going to have 3 different race and ethnicity fields for 3 different libraries. We do have other fields we could use in the database to collect other types of patron demographic data for sure. Yeah, I do agree. And I think that another committee member shared kind of this like slippery slope concern during the meeting of like, well, what if I want to collect, I don't know, something else. And
favorite
that,
color of patrons so that we can do new branding or something ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. So, you know, I do think that there are industry guidelines that exist like outside of the library world. Like one of the, it's in the email I shared with Alex, I'm happy to share it with others, but like it is very common for institutions in education and healthcare to collect race-based data because they need it to ensure they're providing equity of services. I mean, I think it would be a hard sell to say like, oh, well, this community college doesn't collect dementia data, so we don't need to collect dementia data. But I think we would want to look to other types of institutions that are trusted and, you know, kind of in the public eye to see what they are collecting or not. I would, again, lean towards, I don't want anything that would be construed as medical data. So, and nothing like, you know, someone could argue that race data is stigmatizing, like you mentioned, like, you know, on the spectrum or something like that. Like, race data shouldn't be stigmatizing, but certainly I think it is in various circles and whatever. I'm doing a bad job at this, but I wouldn't want to collect, I don't know, sort of that more like non-visible, like you can tell that, like, I don't know, I'm floundering, I'm gonna stop, but we would certainly address any concerns that a library had about data collection as they came up. We would do some research like this. We would work with the library to understand their need. We would research what's happening in the library industry and in other industries, and then we would take it to committee to discuss. That would be our process.
And I think that we would have, I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot more at database management, or at least that I've been trying to like, but is what lens are we looking at this through? How are we making the decision and having a good framework so we know what do we have to think about when we're making the decision for this, right? Because I think it's easy to be like, well, that doesn't affect me, I'll just vote yes. But like we have to frame how we're reviewing the information. And I think Deborah does a really good job in preparing documentation for us that allows us to frame it in a way that isn't about me as the executive director at the Northbrook Public Library. Instead, it's me as a representative on database management that focuses on everyone in the consortium and all the ramifications and how that all plays out.
So I would be interested in seeing what you sent to Alex, Rebecca.
Sure, I can forward that to the whole committee. So everyone
It was really helpful.
That would help me, I think.
Same.
making a note.
And Rebecca, if you have time, I strongly recommend you listening or watching the part of the meeting where Rebecca talks about desegregating data, because she stated,
Disaggregating.
what did I just say?
Desegregating.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm jumping in with the correction.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But like the way you described it, I couldn't, but it like was like, oh yeah. Like I couldn't replicate what she said, but it was really helpful for me because it's coming at it from a completely different way than we typically look at patron data in libraries.
Well, Rebecca, I'm glad you are seeking help from an EDI consultant on this. Like, it makes me very nervous. I see where Kate's coming from, and like I had no idea this is coming, so it makes me anxious at the moment. And but it's an unplaced anxiety around it. As in like I've always said, privacy. The less information, the better. I kind of see where Alex comes from. Like the less I have, the more that can be subpoenaed. And I also know that people who have African American sounding names are less likely to get interviews. And I also know that I have staff that, besides their best experiences or whatever, are not aware of biases that they might have. And if they see that little, AA come up or H or whatever for the race, of course, it's always them. And I could see that really being a training opportunity, if you will, but it's just something I'm thinking about. So I'm really happy to hear that that you're seeking expert opinion, because I'm all over the place and I want to stop talking too.
Yeah, I will add that I think that's a really interesting point, Mick, and one that didn't come up, that would staff who have their own biases then use that data, not to like go out and like get people, but to like alter the way they provide service or which options they offer. So I
guarantee
will,
you that it would. I can guarantee you it would. I've been in communities where it's a huge
yeah,
American population, and it was a staff issue because it's always those people. And like,
right.
wait a
Yes,
minute.
I have met the people who say those things as well. So I will add that to the list of training topics for the consultant to address. And maybe that would be something that we alternately add, or again, work with the Rails committee, since it's not just a CCS issue. But that is actually not something that I had thought of. So thanks for bringing that up, Mick, and I will add that to the Hubway list.
And that is something that came up in the discussion I had with my staff member. She's like, well, but then people can use it against them. And I said, but if we don't collect the information, we won't know if we're able to serve the people. So we're basically saying, oh, we're going to allow people to continue to be racist because we don't want to deal with addressing that issue, which is an issue. And then that means we're still not serving the people that we need to be serving appropriately. So we're still allowing the privilege to win, is how I look at it. Biz would be able to say that better.
On the converse of some of this too, I've seen several things recently about the lack of certain ethnicities being on the choice lists, in particular Arabic. They have to choose either other or white. They say they're not white, even if they are light-skinned. So I think let's just make sure we have everything that we need to.
That
on
it's
the
not a
platform.
binary or even a tertiary. Really good point, Diane.
Gang, I'm confused. I don't understand why demographic data like this would be collected on patrons. If locally I have an interest in exploring the demographics of my community and extending my services, I have a subscription to Gale Analytics, and that gives me a clear picture of the entire map of my community, as well as having access to census data that can tell me all about my community. It can also tell me where my card holders are and where they're not. I know that that's not part of what the database is doing, but also locally we've decided I don't know. I'm kind of frustrated about the way that we're handling the birth date function, let alone adding this whole host of other information that could be potentially manipulated. I think that if individual agencies are looking at how they can extend their services to cardholders, this isn't really the location to collect that information, that there are other resources that are available to us. It concerns me to collect this information and hold it in the database. I think that individual organizations have their own standards that they're going to use for how they're going to analyze their services to the community. I don't know that it should be coupled inside the database. So I want to try to understand, where this is all coming from, what the motivation is.
Yeah, I think Karen brought up a really good point when she was speaking to the committee. The census tracts and census blocks in Evanston, they're pretty granular, but they're not at the address level. And there are several neighborhoods in Evanston, or at least a few, I don't know how many neighborhoods total are in Evanston, but there's neighborhoods in Evanston that have been historically Black neighborhoods that are now being gentrified. So that's not necessarily going to be reflected in Gale Analytics. So if it says like, oh, 60% of the patrons in this neighborhood are actively using the library, we don't know which 60%. Is it the gentrifiers who are coming in and saying, oh yeah, these services, I have a car, I can drive to the library, these services at Evanston are helping. So it is really to get that granular level of data. Currently, Karen says, we'll go into a program and we'll physically look at who's in the room, but that's making a lot of assumptions, and it depends on when the staff member goes into the room. And that's not sustainable or really appropriate to be kind of counting and labeling people in that way. So that was one point that Karen brought up that I thought was really helpful. And then from just a data point of view, trying to match the cardholder data with the library data. And I'm not too familiar with Gale Analytics. I know there have been some privacy concerns about that tool as well, and what data is stored there and how it's accessed and stuff. And I know they've made some positive changes, so it's not about Gale. It can be really challenging to accurately map that data from one source to another. So the most accurate collection would be kind of tying that cardholder data directly to that demographic data. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, you know, bad actors, people using the data the way that they shouldn't, all of those things, I mean, I feel like that's an issue in libraries of like hiring and training, and that, you know, if your library is not collecting it, like they will see relatively few patrons who have that data attached to their record. But that all of us should be making sure that our library staff are appropriately trained in appropriate data use and patron privacy. I think the example I gave at the meeting, which was like so far-fetched, is like, I could look up now everyone who has suspended holds for like more than 2 weeks and assume they're out of town and get their address and go look to see if there's anyone at their house and if I should rob it. Like, I'm not going to do that. NSA, not a thing I'm trying to do. But I think there's lots of ways that library staff can access and potentially use data harmfully, and that it's our job, especially as leaders in the library industry, to be constantly talking about that and training and not avoiding collecting important data to provide equitable services because we're afraid that some people might be, you know, one, a bad actor. And then in the committee, there was a lot of talk about like staff comfort levels. Like, well, I wouldn't be comfortable asking someone what their race is, so we shouldn't collect that. Well, it's like not about my comfort as a white lady, whether or not we're providing appropriate services to all members of our community, regardless of their race. So I 100% acknowledge this is a really complicated issue. And for me, it comes down to not wanting to stand in Evanston's way as they're gathering this data. And no other library will be required to collect it. That is a thing I am saying now, and I will say again, and I will continue to say. And again, we can even make the field unusable for other library staff. It is really just a question of like, if a library wants to use it, are we providing the resources to use it effectively? And that's what I'd like to work with on the consultant.
Thank you for that extra information. I thought it was helpful too. I was kind of thinking similarly to Anthony. So that the additional information I think is very valuable in considering how this could benefit some libraries in CCS that may opt in to do this kind of thing.
Well, and I think it's so important that we all remember that one of our core values is patron privacy. And so that is something that we hold so deeply within ourselves, and we advocate for so strongly that when anything, I think, comes up that might butt against that, we all kind of like lock down. And I think it's helpful to get other ways of looking at it, right? Because I think that's why I was uncomfortable and why I reached out to Biz, because I'm like, ooh, no. And this is a learning opportunity for all of us. And I'm really excited that we have people like Deborah and Rebecca who have knowledge and have done research and have resources that they can share with us to help us all learn and grow and evolve to a deeper understanding of patron privacy in a different way, right? That we can still protect the privacy while also collecting this data.
I think that's a good point and a good reminder that, you know, staff should be trained on data access and confidentiality, just as a matter of course. Would it be something that we would want to consider if a library were to opt in to collect this kind of information, that library should demonstrate that all of their staff have had recent training in that? I mean, it may or may not be.
I mean, in terms of like working with Evanston, we're like working with them on like what they're using the data for and like how they're going to collect, like we're learning all of this with them. So that's maybe not a requirement I would put on them because like it's all part of their thing and like it's a thing we know they're doing. But I certainly think it would be worth discussing with with another library before we just flip the switch and say like, okay, well, have you reviewed these resources? Like, do you understand these potential issues? I think that's reasonable,
Mhm.
wise, prudent.
I mean, I don't know that it's something that we would want to collect at Algonquin, to be honest. I mean, there's a part of me that's like, yes, we should collect this because we could do so many good things with it. And there's another part of me that's like, no, we don't need to. And I'll let those two parts battle it out later. But, you know, before we started collecting that information at Algonquin, I would want to know that my staff was all trained. And, you know, I would want any director, and I would hope any director would feel the same way before collecting that information to know that their staff is trained.
And I think having a list of some of the, like, I just did a quick search because I know Rails has done stuff. So they have, just in looking at the CE archives, navigating the changing landscape of library privacy, wrangling library patron data privacy, libraries and privacy laws, like just giving those to these libraries, right, is helpful. Because I'm pretty sure that I'm not pretty sure, like, we maybe mention it when we're training people, but I'm sure that my CERT clerks would not feel that they had a really deep understanding of patron privacy, and yet they're the ones accessing the databases, the patron ILS data the most.
Right.
So are we doing any of that at all right now? So maybe we start with doing that.
Right.
Right. After we get through COVID.
Right. It is still a thing. All right. Anything else that we need to discuss about this upcoming project with Evanston? I will be interested to hear what the consultant has to say and how that shapes what this option will look like. And I'm thrilled that we have a consultant going in on this project. I don't think there's a more responsible way to do it. So, all right. Rebecca, Executive Director report.
Executive Director report. I did make a couple of notes of things I wanted to make sure I touched on. Oh, we already did it. Which was monitoring OMA. We already talked about it. Are there any questions? I do have one thing, but before I get to it, are there any questions on my report that's in the packet? There's a lot of small project updates. Anything that anyone wanted more information on or to discuss? Thumbs up from Anthony. I like it. Okay, hearing none, Deborah is here today learning the ropes as our acting executive director. She and Pam and Sarah and I will be meeting right after this meeting to talk about kind of the transition, especially as July 1 approaches. And then we'll have some separate information for officers, but we're really like, all of our officers are currently on the committee, so that should be an easy orientation as I'm like looking around. So as you may remember, my original leave start date was on or about July 6th. That is currently in flux, and it could be as early as Friday, and as at this time late as June 15th. So I don't know when things will happen, but it seems pretty clear that they will be happening earlier than anticipated. So I will be in very regular communication with my staff. And then, you know, should I go into labor, I will let both Sarah and Pam know, in addition to CCS staff, just to make sure there's no drop in that communication. But we are working to get Deborah up to speed. Beth's working on bank signer paperwork. But I did just want to touch on the June executive committee meeting because Sarah, you're going to attend remotely. That's correct, right?
Remotely remote, yes.
Yeah, and so Mick, you're going to come in as treasurer, and then Beth, Deborah will be set up to sign checks by June 9th. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure we had that in place, well, in case we needed to get someone else from the board in, but we should be good on that. And then we'll work on the transition paperwork to get Pam signed up to sign checks, et cetera. So Also, thanks for passing a paid parental leave policy. A couple of individual directors brought it up, and I was really hoping someone would get pregnant before me, but nobody did. So I will keep in touch about my leave plans and how things shift and change. But I am fine. I feel fine. We just are being cautious about little baby to be in there. So I just wanted to keep you updated.
I have a really important question.
Yes.
Do you have a plan in place for sharing adorable pictures with all of us and important information like date, name, weight, and height?
Yes. Actually, Ann Slaughter is my model for this. When she was at Oak Park when she had, I think, both of her babies, but I was only there for the second one. She had a template email ready to go because
Brilliant.
she's so on top of things. So then I think her husband just plugged in the deets and added a picture. So yeah, Ann Slaughter is just on top of everything. Just
That's
if you're ever
brilliant.
wondering who's organized, it's her. So that is my plan.
I can't wait to see pictures of the baby
Yes, same.
and find out what her name is.
It's not going to be Marlet.
All right,
That's
but
just
we
the
can still
inside
keep
name.
calling her
We'll
that,
need an
right?
outside name too. So that is it. I didn't feel like that needed to be a closed session employee performance, whatever thing. It's just an update on leave. Okay, cool.
That's your information and I agree. And if you are comfortable sharing it in open session, then I would not stop you.
Cool. So that's what I know. I'll keep you all posted as, well, I'll keep Sarah and Pam posted. And then if anyone, I don't know, wants to know more, you could, I don't know, request updates from Beth and Deborah, because I'll tell them everything. So they'll be flat, like, I don't want to like just spam people who don't care about my baby. I don't expect the library community to want updates, but if you do want them,
They're going to want updates.
lots of people have lots of babies.
Yeah, but none of them are the executive director of CCS.
That's true.
Never enough babies. Never.
Well, I promise that I will keep anyone who wants them in baby pictures.
Right.
Noted, Kate. Noted.
While I am out in Colorado in June attending remotely remote, if I am lucky, I will be able to hold my baby nephew while I'm meeting.
That'll be delightful.
He is a week old today.
That's so teeny.
Yeah, he is. He's a little bitty.
I was supposed to meet mine spring break 2020, and I have not met him yet.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm meeting him in July, and he's a year and a half. I'm like, can you pretend to let me hold you like a little baby? He's running all over the place.
Aw.
My cousin, who is the first baby that I ever held, had her first baby during COVID. And so Georgia is now 9 months old and I haven't met her yet. And she lives 20 minutes away. I just am like, I'm not dreaming up your baby.
Yeah.
All this baby talk. I'm getting a baby in early July, but it's got 4 legs and is fuzzy. So
Oh, that's fantastic.
Fur babies are
Congratulations, Diane.
he is not born yet. Hopefully this next week.
What flavor of puppy are you getting?
A golden retriever, only a cream colored one. So
They're so
unfortunately.
beautiful. They're so beautiful. My mother-in-law-ish was looking to adopt like a cream golden, and I was looking at puppy pictures. She went with a mini golden doodle, but your dog's going to be so beautiful and majestic.
Well, he will join his big sister, who's a 3-year-old Bahamian pot cake, which is a mutt, basically.
I remember when you brought that dog home.
Yeah. Goofy things that people do. I don't know.
I love it. More dogs for everyone.
right?
Or any animal.
Or any animal. Pets for all.
That's for all.
Pets and babies.
Yes.
Yes. I've really taken our meeting off agenda.
I
Sarah.
did this. I
apologize.
did this, Rebecca.
It has been a very a joyful 5 minutes. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that needs to be discussed? I think we just had the one thing added to the agenda, which was discussed during committees and groups. Otherwise, I am ready to adjourn this meeting at 11:23. Going once, going twice, we are adjourned.